Welcome to the Fralin Spotlight Talks for YouTube. Before we begin, I encourage you to use these videos interactively. When you are prompted to observe, pause the video and look carefully. When the educator asks a question, feel free to pause the video again and discuss your observations and ideas, making sure to address what you see that makes you say that. Enjoy!
In this video, we'll be talking about two photographs, Final Portrait, Holly and Charles Wright, and Final Portrait, Peggy, from American photographer Holly Wright's 1983 series, Final Portraits. We'll begin by taking a long, slow look at the photograph of Holly and Charles, starting on one corner and letting our eyes wander along the edges before focusing on the subjects. What do you notice about their surroundings? What surface are they lying on? Notice their outfits, their facial expressions, and body language. Take some time to pause the video and write your initial observations or share with a partner. If this photograph were a frame from a movie, what might the movie be about? What do you see in the photograph that makes you say that? What part of the movie do you think the scene might be from? I notice their clothes look kind of formal, so I imagine it could be at the end of a movie when they've returned from a party. Now we'll turn our attention to the photograph of Peggy. Start at the border again and slowly move around the edges of the photograph before focusing on the subject. What do you notice about her outfit? What about her body language and facial expressions? Where is she lying down? Ask yourself the same questions about this photograph of Peggy as you did with the photograph of Charles and Holly. What kind of movie might this be a scene from? What could the movie be about? And what visual details make you say that? Pause the video here for a moment and discuss your initial thoughts with someone next to you, or write them down. Now that you've shared some of your initial observations, thoughts, and inferences, let's talk about some of the context behind the series. Holly Wright's Final Portrait series is a collection of 8 full-length double and single portraits of Holly's friends and family, taken from directly above the subjects. The portraits are about 6 feet tall, making them both visually and physically striking. Wright asked her subjects to adopt a pose and expression that conveys how they would like to meet death. She was inspired to do this when thinking about how wealthy people sometimes commission portraits of themselves to be sculpted and included at their grave or final resting place. Now that we know this, let's revisit our observations about the different elements of each photo. How has learning more about the photographer's concept or idea behind these portraits changed your first impression? Feel free to pause the video again here. The subjects were given the same prompt, but the results are 2 very different photographs. We can make inferences about how the subjects want to be remembered by comparing the 2 photographs. What do you think it means that Holly is alongside her husband, whereas Peggy is by herself? What role do a person's loved ones play when we think about their death or memorialization? How are the places that they're lying different, and what might this tell us? How are their clothes different, and what does this say about their attitudes towards death? Peggy is wearing jeans and cowboy boots, whereas Holly and Charles are in more formal attire. Why do you think they made these choices? What do these outfits tell us about the different personalities of the subjects? Charles is wearing something covering his eyes. What is it? Why do you think Charles has his eyes covered, but Holly does not? Compare the different body language and facial expressions in the 2 photos. How are they different? Whose body language makes them seem more confident? What do you see that makes you say that? carefully compare all these different elements of body language, outfits, location, because now that we know the context of the series, we can use these different choices in each photograph to learn how the subjects feel about death and how they might want to be remembered. Let's end this discussion by thinking about how you'd represent yourself if you were included in this series. How would you pose? What clothes would you wear? Where would you lie down? And most importantly, how would you want to be photographed for the last time? Thank you so much for spending time with Holly Wright's Final Portraits. As we end our time together, I invite you to reflect on this experience and think about what you might tell a friend or a loved one about these photographs.
We hope you've enjoyed this Writer's Eye Spotlight Talk. Please reach out to the Education Department with any questions or feedback. Our email is museumoutreach@virginia.edu.